You know that feeling? Maybe you're stuck in traffic or just lying in bed staring at the ceiling right before you fall asleep, and you get this weird lingering sense that you're searching for something, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Like there just has to be more to the daily grind, right? Well, welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to do something really fascinating today. We're merging some historical diary entries from the 1960s with a profound spiritual magazine from 2018 to map out what these texts actually call the soul's ultimate journey home. So we're exploring some incredibly beautiful concepts today about the human condition, karma, and inner meditation. All right, let's jump right in.
Let's start with this powerful, mystical poem because it just perfectly captures what happens when a lost, wandering soul finally encounters the majestic love of the Lord. The source text actually describes this encounter like a beggar meeting a king. Think about it. When you fall in love with a king, you willingly leave behind all your rusty little worldly coins and vanities, right? It's just such a beautiful framing for the spiritual path because it completely shifts the focus. It moves us away from the idea of rigid religious rules or harsh obedience. Instead, it reframes spirituality as this profound, transforming love story between the soul and its creator. It basically tells us that true spiritual growth isn't about what you force yourself to give up, but rather what you just naturally let go of when you find something way more captivating.
Section 1. The Universal Problem, the Lost Soul.
To really understand this journey, we first have to acknowledge the universal problem we all share. And I find this so interesting. The texts suggest that this deep restlessness we all feel, it's not a psychological flaw, it's a spiritual truth. We are literally lost souls wandering in a world where we just don't truly belong. Our whole daily scramble after wealth, fame, all that stuff, the text describes it as being tangled up in a net. We run harder, we run faster, piling up all these temporary things, but at the end of the day, it just leaves us frustrated and distracted. Now contrast that with our true home, which is described as a place of eternal quiet and inner peace where the Lord is waiting. And here's the kicker. The pain and suffering we experience in this temporary illusion, it actually serves a very specific purpose. It acts as friction. It prods and pushes us until we finally get tired enough of the rat race to actually start looking for that eternal peace. This brings up a pretty sobering thought from the source material, which frames our current physical human body as a fort that we have to somehow escape. The texts emphasize that, hey, we've had families, we've eaten, we've drank in countless past lives. We've done the mundane routine over and over and over again. But the one unique opportunity we have right now, sitting in the specific human form, is to do our real work. And what is that work? It's to practice devotion so we can return to our origin. So when you stop and reflect on your own daily routine, it kind of forces you to ask, am I spending all my energy just decorating the inside of this fort instead of actually trying to find the exit? But then how exactly do we escape? Because we certainly can't do it alone.
Which leads us to Section 2, the True Guide, Navigating the Illusion.
Because we simply can't find our way out of this physical fort completely on our own, the texts argue that we desperately need a living master to act as our navigator. Look, books, scriptures, ancient philosophies, they're amazing for inspiration. But think about it. If you want to learn advanced physics or how to fly a plane, you need a living teacher right there to correct your mistakes in real time. And spirituality is literally the most complex subject out there, making a living guide absolutely essential. This master is exactly like the king from our opening poem. According to these magazines, once a true guide accepts you, they make a solid promise. They promise to personally bring you into his eternal palace, taking the entire responsibility for your safe travel completely onto their own shoulders.
But, human nature being what it is, it often gets in the way. We have to remember that the master operates as a pure mirror. There's this truly fascinating diary entry from the 1960s where the speaker recalls a time when he strongly disagreed with his master, but then, years later, he realized that whenever he saw a flaw in his guide, it was entirely his own lack of vision. Honestly, how often do we do this in our own lives? We blame our teachers, our mentors, our circumstances when we're the ones failing to grasp the big picture. The text reminds us that the guide sees the entire map while we're just squinting at a tiny fragmented corner of it.
To emphasize just how crucial it is to absolutely trust this guide, the source text shares an unbelievable anecdote. There was this simple servant who had to cross a really deep, dangerous river every single day to deliver food. The thing is, he didn't know how to swim. He just focused his mind entirely on his master with pure, unwavering faith, and get this, he miraculously walked right over the surface of the water. Well, a highly educated, supposedly smart pundit saw this and decided to try and copy him. But the pundit had doubt. Just in case the faith didn't work, he tied a heavy physical safety rope around his waist and secured it to a tree. And the irony here is just tragic.
His reliance on the physical world, his absolute need for a backup plan instead of having pure faith, literally weighed him down and he drowned. Moving right along to Section 3, the method of love, the inner practice.
All right, so once we have the true guide, we're given the exact operating instructions for the journey. Now, you might be thinking the answer is extreme discipline, right? Like running away to a mountain cave, cutting off all your friends, punishing yourself to force your mind into submission. But the 1960s diaries explain that this approach fails miserably the second that person returns to the real world. The source beautifully compares our restless mind to a dangerous coiled snake. Think about it. If you just force a snake into a tight basket, it doesn't suddenly become peaceful, right? No way. It stays furious in there, and the very second that lid pops off, it strikes. The desires are still there, they're just suppressed. So the sources are super clear on this. You have to live in the modern world, fulfill your daily responsibilities, but completely change how you approach your inner mind.
So, if we can't just shove the mind into a basket, how do we tame the snake? Well, we have to charm it. The mind is a fascinating thing. It always has to be thinking about something. It literally cannot just sit totally empty. So instead of fighting it, you give it something incredibly beautiful and sweet to focus on. By creating the impression of inner light and sound during meditation, all those heavy negative impressions of your daily grind are naturally replaced. It's a gentle transition. Actually, it's like you don't fight the darkness, you just turn on the light.
And this brings us to the specific practice the texts outline. It's known as Surat Shabd Yoga. Simply put, it's the practice of focusing our unwavering attention at the eye center to connect with a divine inner melody. This sound acts like a massive magnet that literally pulls the soul upward. By holding your attention firmly right there, the mind eventually just settles down. The inner divine sound and light are so profoundly sweet that the mind naturally lets go of its worldly attachments. Think of it like this. If you have a tightly clenched fist and you're holding on to a dirty, rusty coin, it is really hard to pry those fingers open. But if someone offers to place a crisp $100 bill in your palm, your hand opens naturally, totally effortlessly.
And now for Section 4, Patience and Grace, the friction of the journey.
Even with the absolute best method and the perfect guide, the texts heavily warn us that expecting quick, magical results is a really intoxicating but extremely dangerous illusion. We're working through lifetimes of accumulated baggage here. To illustrate the pitfalls on this super slow path, the source compares spiritual seekers to 4 types of failing university students. Which of these are you? You've got the wishful thinker, who just hopes to magically pass after death without doing any work today. The surface reader, who gets totally caught up in the aesthetics and outer rituals, but completely ignores the deep internal practice. The absentee, who reads all the philosophy books but arrogantly refuses to get a living guide. And finally, there is the most tempting trap of all, the teacher's pet.
It is incredibly tempting in modern spirituality to act like the teacher's pet. We see this all the time, right? People hoping to just manifest enlightenment, hoping the master's kindness will magically save them without ever doing the unglamorous, really hard work of daily meditation. But the text explicitly warns us that effort and grace must always go hand in hand. You can't just hang around the spiritual teacher and expect to absorb their progress through osmosis. You have to sit down in the quiet, close your eyes, and wrestle with your own mind. That sincere daily effort, even when it feels like you're totally failing, it's actually a plea for the master's grace. The effort itself is what unlocks the door.
To truly drive home how incredibly slow and gradual this progress is, the texts compare gaining control over the restless mind to a monumental, almost terrifying task. I want you to imagine standing on a beach and trying to empty the entire ocean drop by drop using nothing but a single blade of grass. When you really picture that, it sounds literally impossible. And the humbling truth is, it is impossible if you're trying to do it entirely on your own strength. This powerful imagery is meant to show the sheer magnitude of the task and exactly how much relentless patience is required from the seeker.
This monumental task brings us to a really profound 3-step formula to survive the journey: sincere effort, unwavering patience, and receptivity to grace. By offering our sincere effort and backing it with an ocean of patience, we become fully receptive to the Master's transformative grace. There's this beautiful quote from a 16th century mystic referenced in the text that gives the perfect recipe. For meditation, you need a cup of understanding, a barrel of love, and an ocean of patience. You show up, you try your absolute best to focus, you get distracted, you fail, you try again the very next day. And above all, you just trust the process.
And look, if an ocean of patience sounds completely overwhelming, the texts offer an immense, awe-inspiring relief. To prove the staggering power of the Master's grace, the 1960s diary gives the analogy of eating 500 birds. Over our countless past lives, we've accumulated a massive mountain of karmic debt.
In a single human lifetime, through our absolute maximum physical and mental struggle, we might only be able to pay back the debt equivalent to eating one single bird. Just one. But the guide, out of pure love, takes on the immense, crushing burden of the other 499. The grace of the Master clears the unpayable debts from our stored destiny, which is what makes this impossible journey home an actual reality.
We've covered a pretty intense, beautiful roadmap in today's explainer. We've seen that the instructions are remarkably simple, the true home is eternal, and the guide is waiting to carry the heaviest parts of the load. So I want to leave you with a single thought to reflect on as you go about your routine today. You have been given the map, and you know the kind of effort that's required. How are you going to approach the rest of your journey? Will you just hope for the best as the wishful thinker? Or will you sit down and put in that drop-by-drop effort to finally find your way back? Thank you so much for exploring this profound topic with me today. Keep asking questions, keep looking inward, and keep seeking the truth.